When thinking about World War II, the Holocaust is one of the central and most painful issues of the conflict. But the truth is that the brutality of the Nazi concentration and extermination camps was not known to a large part of the soldiers involved until the last months of the war, when the Allied forces managed to liberate the facilities, shedding light on mass graves and prisoners who looked like living dead. The reaction of the American and Soviet troops was varied, from utter shock to blinding rage. In this new military history video, we want to tell you what that first encounter with the horror of the Holocaust was like, and how the different liberating armies of the Dachau and Auschwitz camps reacted. As of 1944, the advance of the Allied forces was constant in several of the territories conquered by Germany. In the process, they discovered signs of war crimes committed by the Nazis on an almost daily basis. The soldiers hoped to find camps for prisoners of war, and special facilities were known to exist for Jews and communists. What they did not expect was to find authentic death factories where hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives in inhumane ways. On April 28, 1945, just 2 days before Adolf Hitler's suicide, American soldiers advanced on the Dachau camp. Many units participated, and given the size of the facility, it is difficult to establish which unit entered first. As the highest-ranking officer on the scene, it was Brigadier General Henning Linden who accepted the surrender of the SS officers present on the field. Dachau was one of the first glimpses of the mass extermination, open graves and gassing mechanisms that would later be found in different parts of Europe. Months before their release, extermination camps such as Dachau had intense activity, not only with respect to the elimination of prisoners, but also with respect to the concealment of the activities. German soldiers knew that the Allied forces would hold them responsible for these war crimes, so many deserted. Those who remained burned documents and hastened to eliminate the last prisoners who could serve as witnesses. But Germany was in a critical state. There were no materials to eliminate these people, there were not enough bullets to shoot them, nor were there resources to kill them en masse by gassing. The officers chose to safeguard the ammunition to defend themselves in the event of an Allied arrival. After several desertions and food crises, the Dachau camp was run by an extremely small group of SS officers, the bulk of the force having withdrawn to the Alps, where they planned to take cover and resist. In April 1945, U.S. military medic Harold Porter was sent to assist with the liberation of the Dachau camp. Porter immortalized his impressions in a letter to his family. As we approached the center of the city, we found a huge 50-car train with a broken engine. Each car was full of corpses. There were thousands of bodies, all starved to death. That train, located in the center of Dachau, became known as the Death Train and is frequently cited as the first great evidence found about the Holocaust. But within the field itself, things were even worse. In his letters, Harold Porter describes how he was led into the facility's crematorium, a 20-square-foot room filled to the ceiling with corpses. It was a stinking, putrid mess. They had purple faces and bulging eyes. They were just bones and skin, Porter described. The doctor and all his colleagues who liberated Dachau were deeply affected by what they saw in that field. Many soldiers were unable to process it. Although they knew Nazi brutality, up to that point in modern history no one had been faced with that magnitude of violence and disregard for human life. Some soldiers snapped, while others suppressed their feelings to work their way out with determination. But not all the soldiers took the Dachau images that way. Many were furious and decided to dole out their own justice. Troops of the 45th Infantry Division went crazy when they saw the train of death. When 4 SS officers surrendered, Lieutenant William Walsh of the aforementioned division escorted the Germans to the train, forced them aboard, and executed them on the spot. Those spontaneous executions did not stop. When Walsh and his men entered and saw the huge piles of corpses, they were all thirsty for revenge. 30 SS officers were taken to an internal camp. Walsh ordered their execution. 17 Germans were killed before a higher-ranking officer stopped the slaughter. It is estimated that between 50 and 120 Germans were executed by American soldiers, enraged and crazed by what they had just seen at Dachau. The figures vary depending on the source. We will never know for sure. Many soldiers chose to arm the prisoners, allowing them to do whatever they wanted with the Germans who had been their captors for years. Some doctors refused to give medical attention to the wounded German officers and guards, which resulted in numerous deaths. When General Patton became the military governor of Bavaria in 1945, he blocked all investigations into American crimes carried out during the liberation of Dachau. Those who shot German officers motivated by revenge never received any reprimand. In Auschwitz, the situation was very similar, both before and after the liberation. In the weeks prior, officers had attempted to erase any evidence of the crimes committed at that facility, deleting documents and massively cremating the bodies of the victims. Unlike Dachau, Auschwitz was liberated by Soviet forces. When the 7,000 prisoners still alive saw the approaching Red Army, many cried with joy. The Soviet soldiers had no idea what they had found. Once fully liberated, crimes committed there began to come to light in the darkest ways imaginable: open graves, rooms filled with bones, bags of hair from thousands of executed people. In January 1945, Colonel Vasily Petrenko, commander of the 107th Infantry Division, arrived with his men at Auschwitz to help during the liberation. Over time he reflected on his experiences there. "I, who saw people die every day, was shocked by the immense hatred the Nazis had for the prisoners, whom they had turned into living skeletons. Unlike what happened at Dachau, there are no documents or records of war crimes committed by the Red Army against the surrendering Germans, although that doesn't necessarily mean they didn't exist. If there is a record of the brutal revenge carried out by the Soviets as they advanced into German territory, it is logical to assume that this same spirit only increased at the sight of the crimes of Auschwitz." After the liberation of several other camps, such as Sachsenhausen or Buchenwald, the Red Army took a rather particular measure. It kept some of them in operation, but this time as a space to detain German officers. In addition, German citizens accused of collaborating with the Holocaust, Polish citizens who had signed their German citizenship after collaborating with the Nazi advance in their country, and suspected opponents of the Soviet regime in general, were temporarily detained there. According to the reports of the time, the treatment and living conditions during that period were almost comparable to that received by the groups that were exterminated during the Third Reich. These were the shocking reactions of Allied soldiers when confronted with the worst Nazi war crimes. Before we say goodbye, we would like to know your opinion. How do you think the Allies should have dealt with the German officers? Leave us your answer in the comment box. That being said, we invite you to subscribe and activate notifications to be aware of our news. We will meet again in the next episode of Military History.